What is going on, guys? And today we are back in the player review mix. We got our second video sent in by BabyRuthless. Love the name, by the way. I think it's fantastic. And, we'll just jump right into it. Well, I'll give a little bit of background here. We are playing 50 cent $1 fun mix. So again, doesn't matter what limit you play. If you guys want to send it in, I'm glad and happy to review it. There's about 30 minutes of gameplay. I've sped it up just a little bit because this gives me the option to play it, rewind it if we need to a little bit. So my guess is we'll probably try to go for about 2 20 to 30 minute videos, but we'll see how it plays out. Looks like we're starting out with Badoogie here. Obviously, easy open on the button with 3-card 6. We get called in big blind. Just obviously starting here, I would say like range on range, like our range is stronger than the big blinds here. So probably we're most likely betting unimproved more often than not. Do improve slightly here to a 3-card 6. So at this point, I'm not stopping my betting. Just going to go ahead and notice that we've caught, let's see if we go from the start. We've caught a 5. We started with an extra 8. We caught a 5. Went a little too far. Extra 5, 8, and now we caught an extra ace. So, why is this pause? Let's go. It is not. Come on. Why are you? Interesting. It's not loading. Let's try again. Let's try rewind that one. All right, there we go. So we kept the ace. Sorry about that. I'm not. Let's see this again. 1 second. All right, so here we caught the ace again. We'll play this one. And we bet and we get called. Player draws 1. And we get to third club here. So in this situation, obviously I expect our 3 card to be good. I don't know how much value we get if we let's see if they value bet. So they check to us. I'm not quite sure of how much value we get by betting the river. We've seen a lot of the cards that we want our player to have to call us. And I'm not quite sure if a 6-3 in this situation is a bet. I'm not even sure what happens. It's just more of an observation here. I think this is probably a check back. I think we want to value bet a little bit stronger. But I know that I think for sure this range is relatively wide in this spot. So I don't know if you're going to get called by I don't know if you're going to get called by a lot worse. And I mean, there's always somewhat of the threat of the check raise, just given the fact that we've bet all 3 streets at this point. So I would probably just check and win most of the time here. But I guess that's just my 2 cents. Go for a bin value bet, it looks like, with the 3-6, and actually do get called by better by the ace 3-4. Not quite sure if they undercut you or not, meaning they just drew a little bit better and they got there. But I think the value bet on the river might be just a little bit too thin with a 3-card 6, to be honest. All right, game changes. Stud 8 or better here. Pretty clear fold right away, I would say, with obviously 6 low cards, something you don't see too much, but nothing really else. You need pretty much a strong range in this situation when you're right next to the bring-in anyways. I think we're just going to load it up and go to the next one. So we fast forward a little bit here and the ace 10-8 into the field. This is also a good fold. And we'll just leave it there. We'll go to that next hand. Okay, so 5-4-6, we find a hand to play here. Notice the dead cards. We had a 3, a 6, an 8, an ace, and an 8. So a lot of those cards are definitely gonna hurt you, but I don't think I'm folding an open-ended, basically 3-card 6 draw here. So I don't think I'm ever folding the 4-5-6. You can kind of see how the action goes, but this is definitely a play, and I'm probably going to, more often than not, come in for raise. The only question is if CT raises here with an ace, do you 2-bet? And I'm not quite sure given the dead cards, but against an 8 open, I think 2-betting here with the 4-5-6 is fine. You get it heads up. If you get it heads up here, you can make one of these pairs on a later street. Meaning that you have the opportunity to scoop, and I'd much rather 2-bet as opposed and not really let this guy get priced in behind you here for an extra 30 cents or whatever it is. Do get 3-bet by the 8-9, and for what it's worth, Flurry was my first student, so my guess is that this is a pretty strong range here with the 8. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that right here. He catches slightly better than you, it looks like, in this spot. So my guess is if you check the king four, 8-9 is going to bet here a fair bit because he has a lot. He has some straight draws in here as well, like maybe some random aces. And now he catches a really bad card for his range. Like I don't expect him to ever be three betting you with like 8 Jack 10, so the straights are out. Like maybe he could have a queen queen. I mean, that's theoretically possible, but you catch really good. Like you two bet him with a four. Now you catch a six, which is obviously like a suited six to your four. So I would consider actually betting here with the sixes. It's kind of close between betting and checking, but I think the fact that you actually caught like a really good card for your range, I think this is close to a bet, and I think I would consider it. And then he checks and you check. So, yeah, I mean that's like fine. And then here obviously like you're open ended with a pair, you catch good again, and he has two, I would say, bricks right now realistically. And now he catches a low card, and I don't think he's paired this low card, so he's probably going to call you again. Meaning if he has a low draw. So there's two things here. One, if he has a low draw, you are ahead of him right now. It means your sixes are best high. If he has a low draw, you have a better low draw. If he has a high, he has no low draw, and you're drawing to beat him. So this is a very clear bet in my mind. And you might, I mean, honestly, you might just get him to fold here. Theoretically, it's possible. Because if you have like ace king high and a 6 low or 7 low here, and he doesn't have a pair, you have him in really, really bad shape. So I like this bet. I think this bet is good. And on the river, you make a 7 high straight. Life's a dream. He cannot beat your low at this point. He can theoretically beat your high, but a 7 low here is good. The best low he can possibly have is 8-4, but I think it's pretty unlikely that he has that. He does have split A's with an ace. That's most likely his 3-betting hand in this situation here, so that makes some sense. But yeah, I think you played this hand pretty good. I think the only thing that's close is Fifth Street, whether we want to bet. I think checking there, it's really close just going back to it because he did 3-bet you on Third Street, and I want to say a lot of times that's like split eights, buried aces, buried kings, something like that. 3 low clubs, something relatively strong. I do tell people a lot, like when you get 2-bet, if you guys are heads up and your opponent doesn't necessarily have a super wide range, I think hiding a lot of the information there is a lot better as opposed to 3-betting and trying to go for the very thin 3-bet and very thin value bet on that point. Because on later streets, if your opponent can read hands correctly, they gain a lot more by being able to read your hand correctly versus, you're just picking up like an extra bit of equity. Like if the equity is like 53-47 on, I don't know, Third Street, I'd much rather hide the information in my hand on a later street to get more value. So you scoop that one. That was a nice one. Queen 4-6 here. Yeah, this is never realistically going to be a play, just given the fact that dead cards and an ace is raising into you. So that one is going to be a muck. All right, split nines here. My guess is if you had some sort of solver here, I would guess that this is some sort of play. Even though you have a jack and a 10 behind you and you have 2 low cards and a 9 dead. I mean, honestly, if you're going to make the case for folding it, this might be one, but you don't necessarily have to worry about too much. You can also just like theoretically limp in this situation because again, like, there's dead money and there's antes. And if they go crazy against you, you can just fold and you got away cheap. But I don't mind playing split nines with a 5 here. And I think some people might call me absolutely insane, but I think there is some merit to consider like limping in the situation with this hand. If you open raise with it, I don't hate it necessarily either. Like I don't hate the fold. This is probably one of those hands that honestly is like really close. Again, if you somehow found a way to throw this hand into a solver, it'd probably just be like maybe a slight loser or a slight winner. It's probably just like really close one way or the other. But my guess is it might be slightly winning here. Yeah, I don't mind a fold. Ironically, the other 9 raises, which is crazy. Vanek 2-bets a 4, which is probably fine given the fact that there's a lot of low cards live. Most likely, I think most likely this hand probably has an ace. The 10 does overcall. And that's another one of the reasons why I said like maybe like limping the 9 might be okay too, because if like this 9 raises and this 4 like comes along with 2 bets and then the 10 decides to come along, I think you can just throw your hand away. Oh, sorry. Drop a pen. Vanek's still catching good. He's leading. So at this point, it's kind of interesting now because Vanek has 4-4 on 5th Street. Actually, I'm not even sure why I'm doing Vanek's commentary, but I guess since we're here, Vanek has 4-4. CT has a pretty good high board, and then Steamroller has like a pretty good high board too. At this point, it looks like he's got a flush. Vanek with 3 low cards here in this situation probably is just going to go ahead and bet. He checks. Interesting. He must have like 2 pair now, and he thinks that like this made a flush a fair bet. Now he raises and most likely made a low, possibly a full house. But in this situation, if I made a low, I think I would just call. Yeah, because I want CT to call behind. I mean, they're obviously chopping up the high at that point, so that's just that's something that you learn playing a lot of the split pot games. Is if you're in a situation where you want one of your opponents to call, it's usually like say in a situation 2 players are going high and you have the only low. A lot of times it makes sense to jam the low. But if they have a very weak high hand, and you call for 1 bet closing the action, it's much more likely they call versus calling 2 bets. Meaning a lot of times you want to get that extra bet. Meaning calling is usually a superior play over raising. That's just very dependent. All right, let's look at the board here with the split jacks. 5-3, ace, 7, jack, queen. So the first thing I would say is like majority of the time what happens here is the 3 is going to bring it in, and like the ace is going to have a fair bit of raises. The only question is like, do you play your jacks or not? And I think it's really important to know what your opponent with the ace is raising. If they're raising a ton of like steals and stuff, like this is 100% play. There's no question about it. If your opponent is relatively tight, it's closer because jacks against a range in like stud 8 or better where they're going to have a fair bit of low cards. Like if they have any sort of like low cards in your hand, jacks I believe is still pushing the equity. It's like an equity favorite, but it's also one of those hands that it's harder to play on later streets. Like realizing your equity is not necessarily great, you're going to miss some bets because of their board. So it's just going to depend, I think, on like how the hand plays out. I also don't think like if the ace raises, you should be 2-betting here. Most likely if the ace raises and you think your jacks are good enough to play, I would probably just be cold calling. Doing a lot of like preaching like what I think could happen here. Because the ace actually has to pick up like some sort of hand here between having a 3 bring in and like, there's 3 low cards behind here. But now since the ace is folded, if the 7 plays, I mean, like we're 2-betting, and if the 7 folds, we're going to open the split jacks. He raises, you 2-bet, good. 5 folds, 3 calls, 7 calls, and now it's important to see what we see here on 4th Street. Flurry catches an ace, so most likely the ace is just going to go ahead and bet. I wouldn't isolate necessarily. I would just probably go ahead and cold call with the jacks. If there had been 2 aces dead, like say CT had an ace and like the other person behind had an ace, and this hand doesn't necessarily pair him, he's pushing a little bit of equity against you, but if you get the third person to fold in between 2, it's probably worth a little bit more to consider doing that. That being said, if he bets an ace, I'm just going to call with the split 9, because you're going to get an extra fold here behind like Jubald here a fair bit. All right, now you make jacks and 7s on 5th Street. So this is actually really close between if he bets. I'm going to head and just call my range because he's got 3 low cards with an ace on it. But equity-wise, depending on how wide he is in this situation here, I believe you still have an equity edge. I don't think it's worth raising for what it's worth. I think calling, again, is slightly better, given a lot of reasons. But we'll see how this one goes. But I expect him to bet, obviously, like ace 7, 8, no jack 9, 7. Your hand is just a continue. There's really nothing else. You make open 9s, he makes open 8s. Not much you can realistically do here. It's probably just a call down, raise if you make full house type hand. But again, I think checking here is correct. Yeah, check calling's good. This is actually, the river card's a really good card. Like obviously having 2 7s in your hand, having an 8 in your hand, it's good because it's less likely he made aces up. It's more likely he has like a low hand in his hand, and obviously this is just going to be a check call and get to showdown. If he does have aces and eights, it's unfortunate, but you know, it's kind of the way it is. But this also, I would say, he's just got he gets a free bet with any low card, so obviously we just have to show our hand down at this point. So again, another nice hand. I think this hand's played pretty well. All right, deuce to 7 triple draw, 7 5 4 3 2 best hand. Obviously here we have a very strong, pretty smooth 1-card 8 draw with an extra 8. So this is a hand that would just most likely be raise, 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 raise. Get called, and you make 8-7-5-4 smooth. So obviously, when check 2, we're gonna bet this hand. He draws 1, and most likely, like if it just goes check, bet, call, check, bet, I'm just pretty much betting every street. The only question is at one point do you consider, it really, like the only thing we're worried about here, like changing our strategy at any point, is what do we do against a check raise? And my guess is with the 8-7-5, we just get to showdown. I think this hand is a little bit too strong. I'm not quite sure what number this is. It's like number 13 or number 14. I used to know this off the top of my head, but I got old. So most likely here against a check raise, I would probably just show this hand down. I know Chris has said in the past, like he would consider like maybe 3-betting this hand because he wants to know for information. I think he wants to do that more with like 8-7-4-3 deuce, just because he has the quote unquote the draw. But I just tend not to break too many 8s, to be honest, especially that smooth. It's kind of a conundrum because like if in a perfect world, maybe you have like the 8-7-6-5-3 and you get to 3-bet, and if they pat, now you get to break that hand because that one's a lot worse, but you somehow have a smoother draw. That's just not the case. You have such a strong hand with the 8-7-4-3 deuce, but at the same time too, that's the one hand you would consider breaking to draw to the wheel. But I would just go ahead and bat your hand if you get check raised, I think. All right, we're gonna skip ahead a little bit further. 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I just wanted to see what the fold was, but that's totally fine. Okay, let's rewind here just briefly. All right, so the next hand on the big blind, we have the 8-3-5 deuce. Again, a very strong 1-card 8 draw. I think at these stakes and against most opponents when you're learning mixed games, like if someone raises under the gun and it folds to you, you can go ahead and 3-bet the you go ahead and 3-bet your 1-card draws. I think there's a case to be made actually calling and drawing 1. I think it protects your range a little bit. Like obviously a raise under the gun is going to be a really strong range, even if they're drawing 2. So we'll just kind of go ahead and see how this plays out. It's just like my notification. Now when CT goes ahead and 3-bets, I think your hand is a clear 4-bet. I don't think really anything to do unless Flurry decides to 4-bet this hand, which be more. Yeah, I mean like he did I rewind it? I guess he 4-bet this hand. Just let this one run. Or sorry, he cold called. So when he cold calls in this situation, like there's almost going to be a 100% chance that one player, specifically probably Flurry, and maybe one of the other players have at least draw 2s, meaning your draw 1 here is doing very, very, very well. So in this spot, I would go ahead and 4-bet the 8-3-5-2. So it does go 1-1. Interesting that it goes 1-1 and then 3. So that's even more of a reason I would say to consider 4-betting a hand. And then CT does take 2-2. So in this situation here, this is just one of those reasons why I would consider 4-betting pre-flop. Now it'd be a little bit interesting considering what Flurry does in this situation, because if he leads in this spot, if you ever think that your players will fold behind you, you should consider raising, especially with like a draw 3 and a draw 2. Because it's not a situation you find too often. But I also think Flurry didn't 4-bet pre-flop, so my guess is his draw is actually a little bit rough. Like I don't expect him to have a smooth wheel draw. So at this point, I think you have the best hand and the best draw, meaning you probably should bet. Yeah, I think we should just bet against the 3 and a 2. So I like this bet. I mean, Flurry here could have some check raises, but I think his draw is somewhat weak, just given the fact that he didn't 4-bet. and we have to take that into account. Oh man, interesting one here in the 1-1-2-2 spot. So I think with card removal, my guess is here if check 2, we want to go ahead and bet and pat this hand. Yeah, I think we're gonna go ahead and we want to bet and pat. Now again, our opponent here raised and took 2, so now we have to like see what the action, like what happens with the action here before we do anything. So I would probably go ahead and call and pat the 9-8. My guess is this hand can be really wide. Like all these players have cards and like, playable cards in their hands. So again, the card removal might be bad. He might just be getting you to break something. Might be trying to get you to break something pretty wide. So I think calling here and patting the 9-8 makes the most sense. This seems good. They stand pat. And yeah, I mean, just given the fact that the pot's relatively big, I'd probably just go ahead and would probably check call. Looks like you pip him. He's got 9-8-6 and you have 9-8-5. So again, I think this hand, the only thing I would say is I think we 4-bet pre-flop just given the action. But overall, I think this hand was played pretty well. And, we did, I think in some spots we kind of like deviate depending on like the action that we saw. But when it goes like 1-1-3-2, and I don't think Fleury had a strong draw just because of the fact that he cold called in that spot. I think like, yeah, we should just push our equity as much as we can there. So that hand I like that hand a lot. All right, we're not playing this one. And the last draw, so we'll not try to spoil anything by kicking it too fast, because I have no idea what goes on. Last draw, 1-2. The flared pair deuces. And 1. All right, looks like we're not going to play this one. Oh, sorry. Oh, yep. This one here in the... Oh, we're playing ace to 5. Oh, perfect. All right. Yep. So you notice that the game changed. Again, it's one of those things where the game change on this one is still not the right order, but I'm told the table refactor will bring that into fruition. So Fleury raises here. You have a 3-card 6 with an ace. Good 3-bet. Looks like it's going to go 2-2 most likely. It does go 1. Again, if Fleury doesn't 4-bet you in this situation, my guess is he has a rougher draw, maybe like a 1-card 7 draw. And then when he checks in this spot, obviously this is like a good check back. We don't really block anything per se. And he pats. That's a pretty strange line, to be honest. I don't think there's much we can really do here in this situation. If we had more pairs, more blockers, then we could theoretically raise our hand and turn it into a snow. But given the fact that we haven't really seen that many blockers, sometimes we're just up against a rough hand, and some players might be sticky. I think that this one is probably just a give up. I mean, we 3-bet, we check back, the pot's small, and now we have like nothing really to continue with. So I think we just give this one up. Yeah. So I like your fold. And then obviously this one is a good fold as well. See if we can skip it forward just a little bit. Yeah, ace 5-7 on the gun. It's also a fold. All right, here. So skip it back. All right, win the big blind now, and we get dealt 3-5 deuce. I think this is going to be the last hand for this video, so this will be part 1. But I have to run here in a little bit. So we have 3-5 deuce. We have 3 to wheel. So this is most likely a calling situation against most opponents. So Fleury here calls. Yeah, call in big blind. Good start. Oh, interesting spot. So we make 8-5 smooth against a 2-2-1. I'd equate this hand probably something like a 9-7 and deuce, but obviously a strong deuce draw. So I most likely just go ahead and check and break this hand. I also think Fleury here, fair bit can go ahead and like theoretically check raise. So I mean, like obviously in a 2-2-1, I think we just go ahead and check our range to the 1 and let him bet. And then I think we just go ahead and break. Oh, and then, yeah, I thought he'd check, but yeah, this is... So, I think the check raise here is a little bit too much out of position. We're not pat. I don't think Flaherty's ever folding unless it goes call, raise, 3-bet, fold. But a lot of times here, if our opponent 3-bets us, he's pat, and we're let's say a significant equity dog in that spot. So I would just go ahead and check call, even if I have a pure draw just like this. Call, 2, 1, 1. So now we make the pair. Yeah, this is kind of close because this range is probably relatively wide, and then obviously Flaherty's here drawing 2, plus we just paired another deuce. We've seen an 8. The first draw, I think you had Jack 9 though, so we're like no other significant blockers. I'm probably just going to go ahead and check in this position. Just check and not love it, but that's just me. Yeah, and in our opponent here, I'm like, could theoretically raise. So I think this is just a slight overplay, even though we have a very strong draw. Because now if he's padding in position here, we're pretty sizable equity dog. So I mean, nothing else really here to do, just call and draw 1. Now we catch an ace. Interesting. Because I mean, now it's almost for certain that like this hand's pretty, I would say, pretty rough. So now in this situation, like I would theoretically, you got to ask yourself the question is, will your opponents ever fold if you turn your hand into a bluff? Obviously, I think the lower stakes you play, the less likely that answer is yes. Like in theory here, your opponent could have a 9, you check to them, they value bet, and then call because, you might be bluffing. There's not I would say maybe not like this, the most high level going on at these stakes. With that being said, you've seen some good blockers in this situation to consider check raising. If your opponent does bet, but I don't know if I'm gonna just go for the lead here with the aces. Honestly, this is probably a really good spot to ask Chris, like, what do you do when you've seen some extra cards in this situation, and because your opponent's not necessarily that smooth. His range is definitely rough in this spot. I probably check with the intention of giving up, but if I see a bet, then I want to raise. I just don't know how often it works. That's the real question. So we'll see how this one goes. Yeah, and we fold. I mean, I don't mind the fold. Like I don't think this player randomly decided to turn the hand into a bluff, just kind of given the way it went, kind of more exploitative. But I also think too, you kind of found an interesting spot to consider a check raise bluff. But I'll leave it at that one. So this was the part 1. This was first part 1. Honestly, I thought the play so far was pretty good. Yeah, I think there's a couple spots that in general, I would say some people might differ with me, but that's just my opinion, my 2 cents. So yeah, this is part 1. We'll put part 2 up pretty soon as well. We'll review that one. And yeah, guys, if you like what you see, like, subscribe, and again, if you want to get your videos up there for review, I'm more than happy to do that. So record up to an hour of playing, and in the future I will review it and go from there. But until then, good luck at the tables, play well. I will talk to all of you guys soon. Bye-bye.